One day, Caitlin had to stay on Sodor for the night while Vickerstown Bridge was having maintenance done. As Henry was out pulling the flying kipper that evening, Caitlin took his spot at Tidmouth Sheds. The engines were up long into the night, telling stories about all the adventures that they had had on the island of Sodor. "And so," said Thomas, "I suggested to the engine from the other railway that he use Annie and Clarabelle to fill out his train, and he agreed. As it turns out, Annie and Clarabelle were just looking for a change in view, and they were very happy to have the chance to go to the mainland." "Wow," said Caitlin. "You would do all that just for your coaches?" "Well, of course I would," said Thomas. "It's important to have a good relationship with your coaches, you know." "Huh. No one's ever told me that," said Caitlin. "I barely know my coaches." "Oh, come now," said Edward. "Surely you must at least know your coaches' names." Well, no, actually," said Caitlin. The other engines were quite surprised. "That's ridiculous," said Duck. "How can you not even know your coaches' names?" "Well, it's not like I talk to them that much," said Caitlin. "She doesn't talk to her coaches?" exclaimed Duck. "Well, I never." "Oh, and I suppose all of you know all of your coaches' names?" "Those of us who take out the same coaches on a regular basis do," said Thomas, "and I can tell you're pulling the same coaches every day." "What's the big deal about it?" said Caitlin. "It's not like I'm rude to my coaches, I just don't interact with them that much." "The big deal," said James, "is what happens if you're in an emergency situation. You have to know how your coaches think and how they work, so that if an emergency does arise, you can handle it quickly. You always have to have your coaches back, and they yours." "I've made thousands of trips with these coaches," said Caitlin, "and nothing's ever happened to me." "Famous last words," murmured Percy. "Anyways, coaches are just coaches, just rolling stock, like trucks. Not that I'm lowering them to that level, of course, but they're not like engines." sighed Duck. "Well, you're young yet, Caitlin. You still have a lot to learn about how railways work, I think." "I'm fine, thank you," said Caitlin. "Anyways, I should be getting some rest. I have an important train to take to the Earl's castle tomorrow." You go there every day, Caitlin," said Percy. "Is tomorrow different somehow?" "Actually, now that you mention it, it is going to be different. Supposedly he's having a presentation where he's going to explain what all of these mysterious plans he has have been leading up to. And Brendam Docks is supposed to reopen tomorrow too," said Duck. "That's going to take a lot of the traffic out of Knapford Harbor. It's going to be a great relief for us on the Great Western Branch line." "Well, then it sounds like Caitlin's right," said Thomas. "We should all get some sleep." So one by one, the engines backed into their sheds. And one by one, they all fell fast asleep, wondering what the next day would bring. The next day, Caitlin steamed into Ulfstead Castle with her important train. Passengers streamed out onto the platform. "Recognize any of these people, Caitlin?" asked Stephen. "I would think at least some would be familiar faces." "Of course," said Caitlin. "I saw all these people when they got on the train. Let's see. There's Sir and Lady Hat and their 3 children. There's Commissioner Moonstone of Scotland Yard. And, Miss Jenny Packard, of course. Oh yes, Farmer McColl and his wife came. They're personal friends of the Earl's, I think. Oh, and Mr. Crinkets, of course, the controller of Eurorail. One thing I still can't figure out, though, is how on earth that fool Morange got an invitation to this." "Somehow," said Stephen, "I get the feeling he didn't. Who are those 2 gentlemen at the end of the platform?" I'm not quite sure. They do look important, though." Yes they do," said Stephen. "Hush now, look. Sir Topham Hatt is about to make an opening statement, it looks like." "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. It is my honor and privilege to introduce a man who needs no introduction. My colleague and personal friend, the Earl of Sodor, Sir Robert Norramby." Yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen." "Stephen, who is that coach with Millie?" Oh, her? You'll see. I hope to God you know what you're doing, Robert, both for your sake and for the sake of this railway. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, fellow Sudrians, and visitors from far and wide, welcome to Ulfstead Castle. We stand here today on the brink of a new age, an age of wonder, an age of greatness, and above all, an age of glory. But before we can look to the future, let us first examine the past. The coach in which I arrived here today is not just any coach. This coach's name is Catherine, and she hails from the Coldefell Railway, which, as I'm sure you all know, runs up the Sudrian mountain of the same name. One thing about this railway of which you may not be aware is that the engines push rather than pull their coaches. One morning many years ago, Catherine and her engine collie, named after the mountain, were making their morning run as usual. The previous night, the two of them had had a bit of a nasty row in the sheds, and therefore were not on the best of terms with each other that morning. As they came down the mountain, the memory of the argument was distracting Coley, and he wasn't really paying attention to what was going on. He began coming down the mountain much too fast for his own good. Danger lay ahead. A branch had blown onto the line. Coley couldn't see this, but Catherine could. She knew if they hit the branch, they would endanger the passengers by coming off the rails. Frantically, she rang her bell and applied her coach brakes. Coley snapped back to attention. He knew what that bell meant. Danger! The two of them braked as hard as they could, wheels screaming along the iron rails. They screeched to a halt, inches from where the branch had fallen. Together, Coley and Catherine breathed a sigh of relief. The train was safe. Some of the passengers got out to see what had happened. When they heard that Catherine had saved their train, they were very grateful. One young man in particular could not help but to express his immense gratitude. His wife, you see, was with child at the time. So in saving two people, Catherine had saved a third. The young man swore he would be forever indebted to Catherine for saving their train and for saving his child's life. As you may have guessed, ladies and gentlemen, that young man was me. And today, I remember not only what this humble coach had done for me, I remember what she taught me. Now you may think that I brought Catherine here today as an example of someone extraordinary, and yet therein lies the paradox. What Catherine did was not extraordinary because it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary how ordinary it was. I have spent many years of my life traveling the world, and throughout those travels I have come to learn something, that the island of Sodor's railways are something special. All of the engines, all of the rolling stock, all of the railway workers have displayed the values it takes to make a railway ideal. Loyalty, integrity, work ethic, friendship, and above all, commitment to the common good. That day many years ago, Catherine was able to put aside her personal feelings because she knew that there was something more at stake. And for as long as I have lived here, I have observed that same altruistic virtue in everyone on every railway on Sodor. I have brought Catherine here today not only because of what she did for me, but also because she embodies the idea that every part of a railway, no matter how seemingly unimportant, is a vital link in the chains of life that hold us together. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the final portion of my presentation, if you would please board the train that brought you here and take a journey with me. There is something that I would like you all to see. As everyone went back and took their seats in their coaches, the Earl strode forward to speak to Caitlin. Where would you like me to take them, sir? Asked Caitlin. Why, Caitlin, to Brendam Docks, of course. It is, after all, the day of the grand reopening. Yes, sir, said Caitlin. As soon as the Earl himself had boarded the train, Caitlin steamed proudly out of Ulfstead Castle. Soon, Caitlin was racing across Sodor to Brendam Docks. The harbor had been closed for months while the Earl financed its complete renovation. As Caitlin neared the docks, she could hear the calls of the seagulls. Wow, said Caitlin. This is amazing! All of the Earl's guests got out and stared in wonder at what they saw. Ahoy there, mateys! Salty! Arthur! It's been so long! Aye, that it has. Sorry it took so long. This was a big project. I can't believe all of this was built in, what, 4 months? Well, it wasn't easy, said Arthur, especially since the Sodor construction team is still working on Tidmouth Tower. Right you are there, Arthur. Luckily, we did have a bit of help. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the latest addition to the Brendam Docks crew. His name be Porter, and he's a really useful tank engine. You bought an engine? Well, of course I did, Topham. We needed the help, and we will need the help now that Brendam is so much larger. Thank you, Salty. Hello, everyone. And now then, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to explain. I have had a vision of a future where mass transit leads the charge into the unknown. A future where polluting cars and trucks are no more. A future where highways are gone, and the magnificent railways that once stood there take their place. I envision a future where industrial supplies and food and consumer goods and people are transported not by road, but by rail. I envision a future where an intricate network of railway lines sprawls across the globe, linking cities, nations, and continents. I envision a future where railways link all peoples together and unite them behind one common goal: to make the world a better place. From this moment onwards, I am going to be dedicating my resources to making this railway a light on a hill, the crest of the peak up at which all people can look, up to which all people can aspire. This is the starting point of the future. This railway will become one modeled on efficiency, modeled on commitment to something greater than anyone here could have ever imagined. The people of this island have shown me they have what it takes to make this railway a model for all people, a model for society, and a model for the world. Friends, colleagues, fellow Sudrians and visitors from far and wide, you have lent me your ears, and now I implore you to lend me your hearts. Join me in realizing my vision of a world where everyone, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is a vital link in the chain that holds all life together. A world run by railways just like this one. A world that will never be the same again. Well, Robert, when you first told me that this was your plan to remodel the world after a railway, I must admit I didn't quite believe you. Well, now you know it is true. It is my life's work, Topham, and it's coming to fruition. Is it? Tell me, Robert, just how do you plan to go about this world-changing thing? Let's call it an initiative, shall we? The Norramby Initiative. That has a nice ring to it. Sir Stephen does have a point, Sir Robert. Your plan is, radical, to say the least. And even if you do change Sodor on some measurable level, what makes you think that the rest of the world is going to follow suit? Sir Robert, might I interject for a moment? Ah, yes, of course, Mr. Percival. I was hoping to speak to you. Percival? You wouldn't happen to be related to Peregrine Percival, would you? Please do not speak of my brother. He was a corrupt man, and he's where he belongs. And so, who are you exactly? My name is Gillian Percival, Member of Parliament. Mr. Percival and I are old friends, you see. But go on, Gillian. You are going to say something. Yes. Listen, Robert. Your idea is rather extreme. Indeed. But I happen to agree that the world does need something to unite it. And what better than an extreme change? You have my full support.
What?
That's right. I have a fair amount of influence in Parliament, and I believe if I pull the right strings, we might even be able to get the Prime Minister himself on our side. It won't be easy, but I'm willing to put the effort into it. And I, Percival, am willing to put just as much effort, if not more, into stopping you. And who are you? Another Member of Parliament? Yes, actually. My name is Hayman Waterbridge. In case you didn't know, Sir Norramby invited the whole of Parliament down here. I only came down after hours of convincing myself that he might actually have something worth hearing. It appears I was mistaken. Oh, come now, Hayman, Mr. Waterbridge will do fine, thank you. Now then, this, what is this plan called? The Norramby Initiative. Right, well, I'm not so sorry to tell you that this Norramby Initiative simply cannot succeed. Why ever not? What have you got against my vision? What, you mean besides everything? Your plan will fail, Sir Norramby, and I will see that it is doomed if it's the last thing I do. Mr. Waterbridge, the train is the other direction. I'll find my own way. The Earl was there for several more hours, answering everyone's questions in great detail. At long last, everyone boarded the train again. Well, time to bring everyone home, I think, Caitlin, said Sir Robert. Sir, said Caitlin, that story you told about the Culdee-Fell Railway, I never knew you had a wife or a child. Yes, well, I did once, Caitlin, but life has a way of taking some things away from us. Goodbye, Porter. It was nice to meet you. Yes, you too, Caitlin. That evening, after dropping off her passengers, Caitlin arrived at the Culdee-Fell Railway. Caitlin, said Thomas, how was the Earl's presentation? What did he have to say? I'll tell you in a minute, Thomas, said Caitlin. There's someone I have to speak to first. Ah, there you are. It's, Catherine, right? Yes, said Catherine. Hey, I know you. You were at Ulfstead Castle today. It's, Caitlin, I think? Yes, said Caitlin. Listen, I just wanted to talk to you. I guess because, well, you've taught me something. I have? Said Catherine. And what might that be? Well, before I heard the Earl's story, I guess I didn't really care that much for coaches. You know, I was polite to them and everything, but I never really interacted with them. Even my own. I didn't even know their names. But you've taught me just how important everyone on a railway is, and just how important it is to have a good relationship with everyone else, so that if the time ever arises when we have to make an important decision, we can make it. Judy and Jillian. Pardon? My coaches. Those are their names. And I never would have asked or bothered to learn them if it hadn't been for you. Thank you. Oh, well, it's my pleasure, Caitlin. Come along, Catherine. We don't want to be late for our evening train. Yes, of course, Coley. Goodbye, Caitlin. It was nice to talk to you. Caitlin smiled. The Earl was right, Catherine, she said. You really do embody everything that this island stands for. Catherine smiled. Then Coley pushed her away. So long, Catherine. Well, said Thomas, seems like you certainly learned a lot today. Well, I suppose I did, said Caitlin. I can't wait to tell Connor all about it. I can imagine, said Thomas. But anyways, what happened at the Earl's presentation? So Caitlin told Thomas everything that had happened that day. And that night, Thomas told all of his friends at Tidmouth Sheds what Caitlin had said. The engines listened intently, silently pondering the Earl's plans and what their implications might be. And as Thomas and his friends backed one by one into their sheds for the night, no one was quite sure what to expect going forward. Well, I went to the Earl's presentation. He's even crazier than you said he was. He has a plan. He calls it the Normandy Initiative. He wants to replace all the world's roads with railways. Some nonsense about bringing all peoples together for the common good. Blah-diddy-blah-diddy-blah. But he's got the attention of that fool Percival, and Percival's practically got the Prime Minister and half of Parliament in his pocket. It's not going to be easy to bring him down. Isn't it? If Normandy has one thing in his favor, it is that he now has everyone's attention. Then again, perhaps that makes it all the more an opportune moment for the Anti-Rail League to re-emerge. After all, what is a good cause without opposition? You have done well, Haman, and now it is my time to emerge from the shadows. Sir? Normandy's plan will fail, one way or another.